This is WPSL Port St. Lucie, the talk of the Treasure Coast.
It is 10:08 at WPSL 1590, the talk of the Treasure Coast, and you're on Ask a Rabbi.
And this is Rabbi Shafir Loeb of Congregation Eitz Chayim, your Jewish home on the Treasure Coast. A little bit windblown and hearts out to those who got flooded, but definitely hearts out to those on the West Coast and to those in the Carolinas now.
Yeah.
Mother Nature is not to be toyed with.
Yeah. Yeah, it's, and the video of Tampa Bay with no water is unbelievable.
And as I often remark in the congregation, that's what the parting of the seas.
There you go.
Right, was like. And if you read the...
that's
Cecil B. DeMille notwithstanding, the text says that an east wind blew all night and parted the seas.
Bingo.
Welcome
to Tampa Bay.
Yeah.
So,
that part of the world gets cyclones. We call them cyclones on the other half of the planet. But it's the same game. And it's the east wind that blows, and certainly we got hit with some of that east wind. We didn't get hit with a lot of rain, although there was enough, some of the particularly the older parts of Port St. Lucie and Fort Pierce to experience water events out of it. But oh my gosh, the pictures from the islands out by Fort Myers and my friends that live out there.
And Sanibel, Captiva, I mean, those are such beautiful islands.
And the causeway.
Oh,
gosh. In a strange kind of way, it reminded me of the pictures of the Johnstown flood. The Johnstown, when that dam broke and it flooded, the asphalt did the same thing that it did on the Sanibel Causeway.
Well, and of course that's a very different situation, but during the '89 earthquake, that's exactly what happened to the Oakland Bay Bridge, where
it just went bye-bye.
Yeah, but again, it was like in the middle of the structure and fell.
People do not. It looks like it's steady, like it's not going to go anywhere. That's why they need to be inspected, folks. We need to pay for the upkeep of our infrastructure.
Yes.
And we need to upgrade. It's particularly the older parts of town, which often turns into the poorer parts of town because they are older. And unless it's a family homestead kind of location, and certainly there are wealthy folks out on the islands, but and I always am amused at the people who talk about they didn't leave when they were told to evacuate. If you don't live through one of these hurricanes in Florida or somewhere else, folks, there's no pinpoint way to know exactly where it's going to hit or what to do. We didn't put up shutters, and I know that most of the people... there was one house in the neighborhood that put up shutters, and everybody looked at him and said, newbie, which may well have been the case. There's so many, and it was a newer home. But, to know when and when not to is an interesting thing. We had, according to the weather forecast, or the weather folks, in our area, we had sustained winds of 39 mile an hour and gusts up to 60. And my neighbor lost a tree. I can see it on his front yard now. It was in his backyard, but the pieces of it are out waiting for the not the brush and bulky, but the yard stuff. And you can see that at a number of homes where some trees, and it's purely a matter of where the tree is, how strong it is, how recently it was planted. I've watched a tornado just lift up trees, and hurricanes do the same thing. Gone.
Yeah, well, our tree right in back of our house, we heard a thud, And, it was like, okay. And the winds were blowing, and I said, I don't know whether it's safe to go out and see. And we looked out the back window, and then there's this huge branch. It fell off the tree right behind us and didn't do any damage to the house, thank goodness.
Yeah. We lost some branches. There's a couple of pine trees at the far end of the yard. There are a number of pine tree branches down on the ground. We have a Royal Ponciana who did a really good job of shedding some of its limbs.
Yeah.
And
of course, their branch system is not very deep either.
No, but the tree itself is fine. And interestingly, I had plants that normally live on a grating that's spread between sawhorses. And I went out and I put all of those on the ground. And I'm pleased to say that the Royal Ponciana did not put her branches down in my plants. So they're all doing fine on the ground. And there was an interesting, one of the plants on my lanai, I didn't bring the plants in off the lanai. They all stayed out there. One of them fell off the table it was sitting on. It was in a cute little orangey pot. I have no idea where the pot is. The pot's gone. And it's in my lanai somewhere.
We had one little flower that made it through the hurricane. It was amazing on our bush outside. And it was incredible. Carol and I were looking at it. The winds are blowing 50 miles an hour. We're just sitting there. This little flower has made it through.
Yeah.
And then, of course, obviously, yesterday morning, the squirrel jumped up and got it.
Yeah, of course. It was the only thing left to eat. Yeah.
That's right. Oh, my.
It needed it. It didn't. I had visions of the possums hanging out from the trees. I have no idea where they go. I'm hoping they just go down toward the ground and quote unquote hunker down.
Wow. Yeah, it's scary. And it's what amazes me is you've got you see stories on not only the local stations but the Weather Channel on the hurricane hunters. That's getting so sophisticated, but they still can't tell you where the track's going to go. It's
a guess. Well, because the storm, it doesn't know where it's going to go.
Right.
And there was this one video, I think weather.com has it. There was a cameraman in the eye and actually took a picture showing the wall and the blue sky up above. And, you can stand outside for 30 seconds or so until the eye wall passes.
Yeah, but they always tell you don't go out. But
yeah.
I did that when we were in the business park in Port St. Lucie during Francis. And, there was that one moment where it's just bright sunshine, and we had Channel 12 and the Palm Beach Post were all hunkered down in our lobby. And, it was crazy.
Yeah.
It was a crazy time,
Yeah, the amazing, you want to go out and see it, but, you've got the other half of the storm to go through.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
And, sometimes it's even worse than the first half.
Yeah, but the moment I saw that video of Tampa, I said, that's exactly what the rabbis talked about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It is.
Yeah.
And you can see that. And the only thing is I can't picture them actually moving in the wind, but that's another story. And again, the 2 million number that's understood as in the story.
Little stretch.
Yeah, a little stretch because, and granted, we have a ton more stuff. When we're talking biblical days and they loaded up their stuff, they didn't have as much to load because they basically had to be able to carry or put it on an animal or in a small cart.
Sure.
But still, you're not going to get that many people to move effectively quickly. But I don't know how fast Tampa water came or is coming back. And again, you don't know how devastating the wind was. It's a reed sea, so it's not Tampa Bay. It's not quite as pronounced as that, but it's the same thing. The reed marshes nearby certainly drained as the water went out. And I'm sure the same thing happened coming out of Egypt. An east wind blew all night. Yeah, we heard the sound of what sounded like metal ripping outside our window at one point, and Bill turned to me and he said, "What do you think that was?" I said, "I don't know, but we'll find out in the morning if we're lucky."
Does somebody have a shed nearby?
I don't know what it was. We're still trying to figure it out because there was nothing obvious in the morning when we went out. The only thing we really had that was house related was that one of the screens in the window popped out of its frame, and it was still there. It had just popped out, and Bill just put it back in. Now, obviously, had it caught the wind just right, we'd have not had a screen.
It would have been a Frisbee, yeah.
Yeah, it would have been a Frisbee, big time. And but that was the only thing. And I'm so glad we replaced the fascia on the house this summer. And that, I think, was a very good move. I'm not sure that the house would have been quite as happy without that.
Yeah, I'm sure. Oh, yeah. Well, and I thought, it was really interesting to see in this storm was just the magnitude of it. I mean,
How big?
Yeah. You look at Charlie. There's some artist conceptions on Facebook that, put Charlie, the entire storm, in the eye wall of this one. And it's like, my goodness,
I think that's a big piece of what's happening. It's not so much that the storms are more intensity, but they're covering bigger parts.
Yeah.
This one was, 480 miles across at one point?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. And, you start thinking about that, and that was the third landfall.
Yeah.
It had already, gone through Puerto Rico and Cuba. And
Yeah. I have a shout out to one of the students that I coach. I work with graduate students and help them with APA and things like that. And one of them, his father lives in the Dominican Republic.
Oh, boy.
And he went down just a couple of weeks ago and got caught, not in Ian, but in Fiona, cutting through.
Sure.
And, it cut through on the weekend, and his defense for his dissertation was Wednesday of that week. And so it was a mad scramble for him to get back out of Dominican Republic and back to Pennsylvania where he lives, but a shout out to Ricky. He successfully defended his dissertation, a very interesting one, on barriers for Latino students in college.
Whoa.
Yeah, an interesting subject.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he learned some interesting things from it. He'll be doing some articles shortly.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, that's stuff we need to hear.
Yeah, it
as
is.
a general population.
And there are some definite problems, and some of them are linguistic. Some of them are also just the socioeconomic of a lot of Latino immigrant families. And whether it's first generation or second or third generation doesn't have the linguistic issues usually, but they do have the socioeconomic if their family isn't able to get well established. So, yeah, lots of challenges. And an interesting one that came out of his research was the difficulty at navigating websites, college websites.
Oh.
And that one might be really interesting to pursue. There might be some interesting ways to explore some of that, because I'm not sure that all college websites are that easy to navigate. They want them to look snazzy
by
and
design,
attractive.
right?
Some of that probably is by design, but it needs to be. We've got to make it so that students can find what they need. And, the days of, only those who can succeed in figuring out our little mysteries and riddles should be successful. Those days are long gone.
I mean, do you even have books now or no?
Yeah, there are still books.
There are still books, okay.
At horrible prices. The e-books are much more affordable for students. And there are some companies like Brigham Young University will, if you subscribe to their service, they will print off a textbook for you for personal use, limited time use. It's kind of a rental, but it's a whole lot less expensive than buying a book. And it's worth checking to see if they have the book you need. But, as far as there are not many easy ways to work around the cost. There's one of my students in one of my psych classes was telling me that his statistics book,
Yeah.
was several $100s.
I'm not surprised.
$200 or $300 for the book. So that's horrific, folks. It's just, and I understand that a lot of work goes into the books, but really now. And I believe we've got a call in. Thank you. We have Kurt on line 1 from Port St. Lucie. Go ahead, Kurt.
Good morning, Rabbi.
Good morning, Kurt.
I guess I have two questions. Your congregation, Chayim, how do you spell the first word of that?
Okay, so Kurt's first question is, how do you spell Eitz? I'll give you both words. Eitz, Chayim. Eitz means tree, Chayim means life, and we spell it E-I-T-Z, Eitz. Now, sometimes you'll see it spelled by other congregations E-T-Z. To me, that would be Etz, and I'm trying to be as close in the English as I can to the Hebrew. So E-I-T-Z.
E-I-T-Z.
E-I-T-Z, and then Chayim is C-H-A-Y-I-M. And you'll see many different spellings for that in congregations throughout.
And what is the meaning of that?
Tree of life.
Tree
Eitz,
of life.
and
Okay,
Eitz is a tree.
I'm thinking of Heim, like in the German H-E-I-M, which means home.
H-E-I-M. Yeah, Heim. Ich bin zu Heim.
So, and that's what and sometimes when I hear you, I'm thinking that's what she's saying.
The home tree. Yeah, that would be kind of cute.
C-H-A-Y-I-M. Okay.
Chayim. Yeah, Chayim. It's a little,
Chayim.
Yeah,
Okay.
little different.
Okay, I'm going to look that up. That's why I want to know how to spell it. I was guessing, but not correctly.
Not a problem. Yeah, it's always a challenge when you're giving the English spelling of a Hebrew word. So it's a transliteration. It's an approximation of the way it should sound, right? So in German, Heim is with an H, Heim.
Right.
And this is Chayim with a ch. But most Americans can't make a ch easily.
You got to do that.
You got to do the ch. Yeah.
Okay.
That in the back of your throat. Yeah, like you're going to gargle.
Okay. Yeah, that's what German is very similar.
Yeah. German has a ch sound as well. It's a softer one.
The other question I have, Rabbi, is did I hear correctly on your show last week that Stuart Address has passed?
Yes, unfortunately he has. Stuart of blessed memory. He passed. It's a little over 2 weeks now. And it was very quick, very sudden.
Was this unexpected and sudden?
Yeah, it was. At 4:30, he said to his beloved that he wanted to go to the hospital, and by 6 he was gone.
Wow.
So yeah,
I assume probably a heart attack under the circumstances.
I'm not sure what the official cause of death was.
It's not important. I just was. When I heard, and I said that, and then of course I guess the confirmation was the fact that your show is an hour earlier now.
Right. Yeah. I've slid in and now we've moved into his slot.
Well, I figured something was up when that happened, but I wanted to call and confirm that because, quite frankly, I didn't see anything listed anywhere.
There is an obituary out there. I'm not sure all where it is. The other thing is if you check YouTube, you'll see there was a 2-hour memorial for him 2 weeks ago.
Okay.
We did his slot,
and
his child was here with me as well. His
I'm sorry
newly
to hear
18.
that,
Yeah, he left an 18-year-old who's at Nova.
Oh boy.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So.
I know he was always talking about his child because he talks about the divorce he went through and said that a lot of it was done for his child. But at 18, that's awful young to lose your dad.
It is. It is, and I can totally relate because I was not a whole lot older. I was in those small numbers as well. So it is tough.
I appreciate straightening me out on the spelling. Now I'm going to go look it up and be more enlightened.
Okay, well, thank you so much for calling, Kurt. Appreciate that.
Thank you.
And
have a good weekend.
You too.
Thank you.
And if anybody else wants to call, it's 772-340-1590, and that's as good a place as any to say if you'd like to sponsor one or more episodes of Ask a Rabbi, and we'll certainly give you multiple plugs and plugs other times during the week as well. Just give a call to that same number and ask for Greg or Carol, and they'll be glad to help you sponsor one or more episodes.
So how was Rosh Hashanah?
Rosh Hashanah was very powerful, and this is not the first time in the time I've been here in Port St. Lucie that a hurricane has chosen to come through between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. So thank you, God, for that.
Oh, my.
The reminder that life is a gift, as is the recent passing of Stuart of blessed memory. So, yeah. Some things are tough, and, I guess I look at something like the hurricane as somebody posted it on Facebook, begin agains. Right. I look out at my plants and my trees and my yard and my house, and I'm very, very grateful that we didn't even lose a piece of fence. We lost a couple of fence tops, but no significant damage this time. But I have 2 cacti up front, and they lost their flowers. They were just ready to open and bloom.
Oh, yeah, sure.
The night bloomers. They had given me a small show, and they were, I don't know, they had like a dozen blooms ready to go, and you'd never know it to look at them now.
Didn't you take a picture of that, though? Because I thought I saw, a picture of that little guy.
I usually do go out late at night right before I go to bed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, wow.
Because it's long gone by the time I get up in the morning.
Yeah.
They don't last.
Well, it's so funny. I've crossed the Caloosahatchee so many times, and it's such a beautiful waterway. I just can't even imagine, what
it must look like.
Oh, yeah. Well, and I posted something on Facebook that I got with Daytona Speedway.
Yeah.
4 feet underwater. Now, that speedway, I'm not a race fan, but I think it's 2.5 miles long. That's a lot of water in there.
Yeah. Well, and how about St. Augustine?
St. Augustine, oh, yeah. Yeah, the video we saw from there was, whoa.
Yeah. I mean, that's a tall seawall. I don't know how many times historically it's been breached. But, they put it up there because they knew storms came up the coast.
But it was like the wall wasn't even there.
Well, once the water tops it, it's there. It isn't there.
No, you're right.
It isn't there.
Yeah. Yeah.
Between high tide and surge. And we're seeing more and more of that because, of course, the water level is higher in the world than it was a few years ago. We are warmer. The water is warmer. And that's part of what's contributing to the bigness of these storms. It's not that it's creating the storms. It's intensifying and magnifying the storms. So it's a more subtle effect than we might think. And it's not so much global warming as it is just climate change. Things are shifting and adjusting, and stuff isn't happening like it used to.
Climate has been changing since creation.
Of course it has. Absolutely.
This little globe moves,
It moves, it shifts. There's ice ages, there's warm periods. And how much of what's what is not easy to determine. It's not a simple thing to figure out. But we do know. And the other problem is that people are migrating from the northern part of the world to the southern part, to where it is temperate, and that puts them in the path of storms. Now, one of the ones that my heart really went out to was that house that burned, where they couldn't do anything because there was no way to get to the house. And I'm seriously hoping there was nobody in it. I haven't heard. If there was, hopefully if there was, they got out and got to their neighbors, because it looked like the neighbors' houses were still standing. But,
CNBC last night had an interview of a guy who rode out the storm on a boat. That was on the Caloosahatchee. And And he just said it's the most frightening time of his life. But he survived.
Yeah.
You know, the boat's gone, but he survived.
Well, that's amazing. Yeah.
Yeah.
We think it's and even the big boats get their rear ends out of the way of the storm. Yes, you can float. A submarine may not be terribly impacted, but I'll bet it is. I'll bet it feels the currents and the.
I'll bet it would. Well, there was, knowing yachts, I think, pretty well, at least 65, 70 footers that were like tinker toys.
Yeah.
On land. It was like, you've got to be kidding, because this has got to be 50 or 60 or 70,000 pound.
Yeah. Oh. Well, the other thing was the number of airplanes. That were flipped, and it's one of the things that when I used to teach flying, I used to stress to people: you really have to tie that baby down snugly. You can't do it loosely, because if you do it loosely, it'll leave. It'll break that rope, because it'll pull it and pull it and pull it until the rope goes. But if it's taut, then the rope's not going to move. And even though the airplane is trying to do what it was designed to do, which is fly, wind comes over it, it doesn't know if it's tied to the ground or flying in the air. It just wants to fly. And so it will try.
Yeah.
And you have to make that rope taut. There's reasons for that. And people get careless. Oh, never been a problem yet. Well, it hasn't gone through a hurricane yet.
Well, I just think of where we go and play at IRSC over in Fort Myers. The arena's right next to the airport. And I hope that everybody at Southwestern Florida is okay at the college.
Yeah.
I know Florida Gulf Coast, there's some problems on that campus, and I hope the dorms were okay, because we have a lot of kids from the Treasure Coast that go over that way to college. And,
absolutely.
Wow.
Well, and Stewart's child is down at Nova.
And they actually, Nova was in an area by the tornadoes that struck in that area, and you just think. Oh.
Yeah, people think it's just the hurricane. It's not. It's the tornadoes. It's here we were across the state from where it made landfall. We were 2 hours away from when it went through Orlando. And yet here we were having significant winds and a few tornadoes that went through.
Sure. Well, I know Carol was on our bank's website, and they listed a big closed the Orlando branches at Merritt Island, that are still closed because of the storm.
Oh, they're going to be a while recovering. They're I was thinking back to it, and IRSC and Kaiser are both open and functioning today, and doing well, and no issues. The public school is still out, and there aren't a whole lot of classes on Fridays. Fridays are the light day of the week, and I don't teach on Fridays, so for me it's not a big deal of it being open, but I could go on campus if I wanted to, and I've gone on both campuses on Fridays sometimes. But we didn't have a whole lot. But the time a few years ago where the storm came through, it took, I don't know, even after the school opened, it took a while for things to get back to normal, and I'm sure that it will on the west side of the state. It's just going to take a while. It's going to take a while anywhere where there was damage, and certainly the causeway is going to take some major work. I guess it'll be ferries for a while.
Yeah, well, and there's definite history there, whether it was our San Francisco earthquake, where you wound up having ferries back from Oakland to San Francisco. And that was like the old days, because they had those regularly back in the 50s.
Yeah.
So,
until the bridges were built. We get used to these modern conveniences. But the other thing that really struck me of modern technology is the drone footage.
Yes. Yeah.
And, it's frightening, it's scary, and drones are incredibly powerful, but what a great way to assess the real damage. it's eyes in the air over the ground.
And if you will, you're not putting reporters and crews.
Yeah, you're not
lives
putting
at
anybody's
stake.
lives at stake. You're just putting the drone over. And even if it plummets to the ground, it's not likely to hurt anything significantly. So I think drone technology today, to be able to see all of these things and to let people know who might be still on the island if somebody decided to ride it out, that there is somebody aware of them.
You know, the video from the Skyway bridge cam,
Yeah.
and to see that bridge moving, it was like, you know, that Skyway bridge, between Tampa and St. Pete is massive.
Yeah.
And, you know, that thing was really moving.
Well, you know, the Verrazano Narrows, right? That bridge moved so much that it departed its moorings.
Yes.
You know, when bridges are built, she said as an engineer, there is a rating to their speed, to the winds that they can handle. And everything on the planet has a limit. You know, we all have expiration dates. We all have limits of what we can tolerate or not tolerate. And
See, I didn't know that, but that makes perfect sense.
yeah. Yeah, they rate it in what are the expected winds. And when and they do expect a certain amount of hurricane force. The big question on something like the Causeway, though, is what was the expectation when it was built versus the expectation today?
That's not a new bridge.
It's not a new bridge, and the fact that they just laid asphalt over the old asphalt, which is what you can see there, and it all gets down to the weakest link of the bridge, and if that's not been inspected and it's not been buttressed and supported and perhaps reworked, you're going to have problems when push comes to shove.
Oh, we had that here with the Roosevelt Bridge.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And people make light of it, but don't. These are very serious things. When nature decides to double up and give you a whammy, it's impressive. Mother Nature is not to be fooled with.
I remember Carol and I used to joke when we started ESPN, and all the bridges that we drove over in Connecticut had this bridge has been condemned by the state. And drive at your own risk. And we're sitting there going, where are we living? This is nuts. But yeah, I guess that's how they get out of the liability aspect.
And when a storm comes, theoretically, they should be repairing and fixing and taking care of these bridges that are overdue.
Mm-hmm.
But it's hard. It's very hard on a state. That's expensive. It's very expensive. And they do how many people versus the likelihood and all those things. Now, you look at those little bridges, and there's probably not going to be 100 cars on the bridge when it goes out. What it's going to do, though, is it's going to isolate the communities. Look at the Chesapeake Bay Bridge Tunnel.
Oh, yeah.
Right, that connects.
We've been there.
Right, and it connects that piece. And I've done that drive if you don't go over the bridge tunnel. It's long.
Yeah.
It's very long.
Very long, yes, yeah.
And the same thing's true with the Golden Gate Bridge, which is why it was built at a time when it was quite a challenge to technology to build that bridge. And it's amazing they did it as safely as they did. Oh, there was a ton of safety put into building the Golden Gate Bridge. Things like netting to catch stuff and people.
Well, the video during the San Francisco earthquake from the Golden Gate cameras was really scary, but it made it through.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a marvel to technology that things stand. And you look again at how homes are built in Florida versus 50 years ago. We've learned, thank you, Francis and Jean, that there needs to be certain standards, and I'm concerned about some of the homes here in Port St. Lucie if we ever get hit, please God, no, with a direct hit from a really powerful hurricane.
Yeah, Well, Francis and Jean and Wilma were all very powerful, but not like that. I mean, and not as large as this one.
And the thing about it was moving at 7 miles an hour.
Francis did that, and it just became this massive rainstorm, and it's like it wouldn't go away.
Yeah, just move on, go somewhere else.
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
And I'm sure that's how the folks on the West Coast felt about Ian. Just move on. You've done your thing. Just move on. There was a woman who said, she posted on Facebook, and I read her post this morning. She said it had been a whole day of just ringing. Her ears are just ringing from the wind noise of having been in the path.
Yeah.
Her home was okay. Everything else was okay, but she is just kind of buffeted, rather not buffered, but buffeted.
It was very interesting. Somebody, and I can't remember whether CNBC or what network it was, but was talking about, you understand, almost nothing has happened at Mexico Beach since they were destroyed a few years back.
Yeah.
And what they were saying is, because Naples and Fort Myers are such big tourist attractions,
They'll get something.
they'll get the money.
Well, there's parts
to rebuild.
There's parts of Katrina's impact that still hasn't been repaired.
And we all know where they are.
Yeah,
In the poorer neighborhoods.
Yeah.
I mean, it's, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Well, and I hate to say this, the amount of funding and effort that was diverted from helping the folks hit by Katrina is criminal. And I'll just leave it at that. When you look back and you can see the paper trails and the phone calls and the thises and the that's, yeah, it's distasteful to say the least. It's horrific. It in some ways it's almost worse than the storm. It's the way that people are treated
After
after the fact.
Yeah.
We really should come together and repair and rebuild and build better.
Yes. Oh, yeah.
We should build, I look at Port St. Lucie and I look at the new homes, and my home, which is 20-something years old, the house that we're living in right now.
Ours, too.
And it's up from where the homes were 50 years ago, but it's not where they're putting the new homes now. And we're changing the landscape here in Florida, and it's going to affect, sometime there's going to be an interesting storm, but that's another part of the older homes getting hit. They're actually lower by several feet, so they're in the floodplains because they didn't, nowadays they build up houses, the first floor of a house, they could put a basement in because they're above the water table so high. I'm waiting. Eventually we'll have basements in Florida because they're building the houses so high.
Wow. Well, yeah, Carol's old Indiana University roommate texted me this morning. He was watching Squawk Box this morning on CNBC, and one of the insurance experts said only 20% of the homeowners in Fort Myers and Naples have flood insurance.
It's expensive. It's expensive, but so is losing your home.
Yeah.
And
really, flood insurance, if you look at it, is relatively cheap compared to, what does it cost to rebuild your house?
Yeah, but then
I
that's
know,
what the
I know what you're
homeowner
saying.
says.
Yeah.
Here's an extra several $100s a year. I have no idea what flood insurance runs. We rent, so that's one of the things that we'll have to look at. God willing, we're going to find a home this summer if the market is amenable. I am looking to buy this summer. But homeowners insurance is not cheap.
No.
Renters insurance is not cheap.
Oh, I'm sure it's not.
And the insurance companies don't like to pay out, even in the event. This is catastrophic to them, too. So all kinds of games get played.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, well, and then there's and this is what's happened in Mexico Beach, and, of course, we saw it firsthand last year with IRSC's basketball team, because the bus driver took us down there, and it was like, there's still nothing here. I mean, it's
Yeah.
like very little.
People
has
have
been-
abandoned it. Yeah.
Very little has been rebuilt there, and you just think, oh my, yeah. And
Well, that's why Louisiana, so many people moved out and have left the city because there wasn't anything there to go back to. There are still homes that are condemned for rotting from the mold and mildew after the storm. And I know that one of the things, an interesting piece of damage at my house is the drive. We just had the walkway and the driveway power washed a month or two ago.
uh-huh.
And the stains from the tree getting pelted in the storm are just impressive on the sidewalk. I've got to go get some cleaner to try to get that resin back out of the sidewalk.
Sure.
So, things are long standing, and the mold and the mildew, if you've got piles of stuff, and in the debris field there's piles of stuff, and probably some dead animals that didn't make it out. All of that's going to rot and decay. So that's just the way of the world. And one of the places where you can see a lot of storm erosion, interestingly, is in the Chesapeake Bay area, in and around Colonial Williamsburg and that area. Some of the outlying communities have almost washed away.
I was going to say, isn't there like a barrier island that is like disappearing?
There's all kinds
there?
of that stuff that's just disappearing because the storms continue to pelt. I have this personal theory that the roundness of the shape of Florida, both on the Gulf side and on the Atlantic side, are a function of the storms that have pelted us over the many, many years. If you look at the typical paths of the storms, if you look at it up just north of Tampa, there's a big chunk like washed out of Florida there, and the curve up along the coast is where a lot of hurricanes like to just skirt and go. And so I think that part of the shape of Florida is because of the storms. And the folks who say that we get hit by so many more storms, yes, we do, because we've got so many beaches.
Well, we have the most miles of beachfront property than any state in the country.
Right, we've got it's not just a little bit more, it's a ton more.
Yeah.
And if you look at how many hurricanes hit per beach mile, it's not as bad, is it? But there's just, we're just a beach with a little bit of land in between.
Well, it hopefully down the line, of course, we learned a lot from Andrew.
Yeah.
That's when the whole new building codes came in. We may get a whole new set of building codes, possibly, because of what happened in Fort Myers and Naples.
Well, there's some pictures that a couple of people have posted before and after pictures, and where there's whole buildings down in what I'm sure was the tourist area. And, the storm just took out the whole building.
Oh, and at the beach area.
Yeah.
Fort Myers Beach. Oh, yeah.
And,
that's gone.
you have to imagine that those were probably not really well built and probably...
No, they were old, funky places.
They were old, funky places, grandfathered in and probably put together with spit and a promise.
Yeah, it's probably true.
And
that have been there since the 20s,
Yeah. And it's not that they're so stable and sturdy, it's that they were dang lucky, and their luck ran out.
Well, and it was so funny. One of the guys that was interviewed on CNBC just said, well, the storm was supposed to go into Tampa. It was like, it's supposed to.
And you think that being in Fort Myers makes it okay? Hello. You're still close. You're still within the immediate circumference of the storm.
Yeah.
So this is as good a place as any. One of the prayers that we recite between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur is this reminder that none of us knows our expiration dates. And there's a line in it, who by fire, who by water, who by hurtling objects, who by wild beasts.
Ooh.
Yeah. It's the basis behind Leonard Cohen's Who by Fire.
Okay.
That prayer is the underlying piece. In fact, we actually we have the words to Who by Fire that we give out and talk about that song as part of the liturgy that we do. because it is based on that prayer called Unatana Tokef, and saying that once a year the whole world is judged by God, and your expiration date may or may not come up. And so we don't know. And none of us knows the day of our death. And so we are all invited to plan as if we're going to live forever, but live as if it's our last day.
Wow. That's strong.
It is very strong.
That's strong.
It's very strong. It's very powerful, and tremendously good advice. Judaism, of course, does not believe in hell. So we don't believe that God is going to eternally punish you. On the other hand, there will be a reckoning. And how do you want to face God? How do you want your scale to balance up? Do you want it to tilt to the good deeds, or do you want it to tilt to the things you know you could have done better? And even so, even with the things that you think you're doing the best, it's never an easy thing to call because there are so many things involved. I know I've talked about it in terms of complimenting somebody over an article of clothing that they're wearing, but even so, let's say you're going to build a bridge. If you're the person who gets to make the decisions, how do you use the precious resources of the community? How much money do you put into that bridge?
Yeah.
Right?
Oh, yeah.
The same thing with an airplane. If you make an airplane absolutely safe, it will never fly. Because all the safety things weigh something. There's always trade-offs. And so the people who make these decisions have to balance. How much money does a community have to put into its infrastructure? How do you prioritize things? How do you decide who gets which medical treatment when there isn't everything available? We saw that with COVID. How do you decide who gets to be intubated? Who gets the equipment when there are not an infinite number of places available?
Mm-hmm.
Because in reality, in life, there isn't an infinite, and hard choices have to be made. How do you balance the overall safety? And who do you prioritize? And unfortunately, in our society, it often is the poor who get the low end of the deal. And realistically, if the rich were in fact paying the bulk of the taxes, then they would be putting in the most. There's certainly and there's inequities in the system, big time. How do you balance? How do you balance who can and who can't afford things, and how do you give? How do you do all that? It's just not easy. How do I help one student? How do I pick which student to help, and how do I help the most of them? So it's a question that spans every walk of life. I'll give you a crazy place where I think of it. I'm in the market, and I don't really need all of the cans of soup that they've got or something. But it's a good price on the sale. Do I take them all? And if I do, am I going to
BOGO.
Well, BOGO, and if I do, is it going to hurt somebody else who might be coming by who really needs it? And I have to say that sometimes that thought occurs to me. Do I take the last tub of butter? Do I take the last of something in a market so that somebody who really needs it? Now, we can argue that you might not need ice cream. You might not need the butter. You might not need the cream cheese, although,
I need cream cheese.
When things get to be, it becomes more serious when you're dealing with things like toilet paper and paper towels, right? If people didn't
water.
If people didn't hoard these things, there'd be a much more ample supply. And I'm going to invite everybody who's new to the Florida community, do what my family does, and which is that starting in May, we go to the store and we buy 2 cases of water. We use one, we buy 2. We use one, we buy 2. And we slowly build up to hurricane season. And then when a storm hits, we do not have to run to the market. We don't have to hoard. It's
Bingo. Yeah.
and then when it comes to November and the season is over, then we diminish the water we have so that we have fresh, and we start again in May. And that is much easier on the supply chain. It's much easier on the stores, and it lets the people who can't afford to do that get that case of water that they need. But we need to not put those strains on the supply chain.
Yeah.
That's a bit of responsibility too.
And that's interesting because a lot of that is self-induced.
Of course it is.
Sure. Oh, yeah.
And then we panic and we scare somebody and I went and got 4 cases of water and they were almost out. So now all your neighbors run because they were almost out. It's akin to yelling fire in a crowded theater. There are times when you have to be much more reasonable about things and not, whatever. Anyway, I'm going to get myself in a really funky place if I don't watch it. So anyway, we are going to be having Yom Kippur this week on Tuesday night and Wednesday. And if you'd like to join us, please go to the website and register. We do not sell tickets, but donations are accepted. That's www.eitzchayim.org. And wishing everybody an easy fast if you are fasting. And if you've got medical reasons not to, please don't. This is Rabbi Shafir Loeb for Congregation Eitz Chayim, your Jewish home on the Treasure Coast. And this has been Ask a Rabbi.
You've been listening to Ask a Rabbi right here on WPSL, Port St. Lucie. Talk of the Treasure Coast, webcaster of the world.